Elliott County looks like any other part of rural Kentucky, but it's not. In fact, it might have the weirdest politics of any place in the country. That's because Elliott County voted for Democrats in every presidential election for 144 years straight. FDR, Truman, JFK, LBJ, Carter, Clinton, Obama, and then?
In 2016, vote for Donald Trump?
Yep.
2020?
Yep.
2024?
Yep. Definitely.
The single largest swing from Obama to Trump happened right here. But a few years later, something just as surprising happened. Elliott County voted for Governor Andy Beshear, a Democrat.
More Perfect Unions reporter John Russell, one of my favorites to be quite honest, just came out with a new fascinating investigative report on Elliott County, Kentucky, where the residents there lost and then later regained their faith in the Democratic Party. Now, I love these reports specifically because of the fact that you have a reporter, John Russell, going into a town that turned on Democrats to support Donald Trump, and he's not going there to make fun of them. He's not going there to highlight their worst moments. He's going there to actually understand what motivates them, what drives them, and why they had a change of heart in regard to the Democratic Party, especially as it pertains to recent presidential elections. But he also wants to understand, okay, you guys turned on Democrats when it comes to, the presidential race, but you guys are supportive of a Democratic governor. Like, what gives? So I think it's a fascinating story, and I think it's really important for us all to understand each other, even if we disagree vehemently politically. So we're gonna break down this report piece by piece. First, let's watch him talk to Elliott County residents about the area's history and why it was such a Democratic stronghold.
I started out a Democrat because my father was. And that was just something, it's just like your last name. You're a Democrat.
Growing up, I was always taught you gotta vote Democrat, vote Democrat, vote Democrat.
What did it mean to be a Democrat? Was it connected to anything?
That is just how the county went. The Democrats was giving money for the county, and we were trying to get roads fixed, trying to, make this county something.
Yeah.
And that's who was helping us.
When a county votes for one party for 144 years straight, it can be hard to know where that kind of loyalty even comes from. Some folks say that FDR's New Deal had something to do with it. The New Deal put millions to work building roads and schools and bridges, created Social Security, and established by law the right to form a union. And for decades, it cemented the idea that Democrats were a party for the working class.
Democrats were looked at for the poor people.
Yep.
They were for the poor people.
Our great-great-grandparents were Democrats, and just taught through the years from FDR on, they believed that was the union support.
I mean, look, it almost seems obvious if you're someone who consumes a lot of political content and has been cognizant of the ways in which the political parties have changed. I do think that the flow of corporate money into campaign coffers for Democratic candidates has had a huge impact in changing what their priorities are. But what's clear to me is that the goodwill among voters that was spurred by FDR's America, by the policies that he championed and managed to pass, that has run out. And so the Democratic Party has been having a lot of difficulty branding themselves as the party of FDR, when they've also been the party of free trade agreements, which has decimated certain industries and certain communities in this country, when they have agreed to and carried out all sorts of corporate subsidies, when they've made banks whole, when they've made Wall Street whole, even as these were the major players, the main players in destroying our economy in 2008, while also simultaneously neglecting the Americans who lost their homes, who lost everything as a result of that financial crisis. These are issues that anyone paying attention noticed with the Democratic Party. They have been kind of cast aside as the party of the elite now. And that is not good electorally speaking. And so Russell then tried to figure out why Elliott County broke so strongly for Donald Trump. And let's see what they found.
I think a lot of it is that we're tired. I'm not saying that Donald Trump's not crooked. I'm not saying Joe Biden's not crooked. They're all crooked.
Yeah.
But, whenever we get an extra $30 or something in our paychecks, that makes a difference. I'm doing hay to try to feed the kids.
At the end of the 80s, the median household income in Elliott sat at $37,000, adjusting for inflation. Today, it's about $39,000. In other words, they haven't seen a raise in over 30 years, while the cost of living has only gone up.
Even after 140 years of voting for Democrats, we have lived not in poverty, not near the poverty line, in extreme poverty.
The poverty level being so hard, it was like, does he have a rope to throw us? And that's what it was.
Trump wasn't getting votes from New York City and LA and all these big towns. He was getting votes from these little counties all across America.
Yeah.
I think it's his anger, and everybody else in this country is angry. His anger filled his campaign, and it was like, oh, I felt this for such a long time. Someone's relating to me.
Hey, don't scroll away. Come back. Because before the video continues, we just want to urge you to lend your support to TYT. You power our honest reporting. You do it at tyt.com/team, and we love you for it.
So I have so many things to say about this. First off, the tax cuts, right? Oftentimes when we talk about Trump's tax cuts, we talk about how the people in this country who benefited the most from those tax cuts were corporate executives, the richest individuals, right? Corporations saw their taxes go from 35% to 21%. And Trump claimed that he was going to do away with corporate tax loopholes. He did not do any of that. So the effective tax rate for corporations was much, much, much lower, to the point where you have fabulously successful and profitable companies like Amazon pay nothing in federal taxes, and in fact, get money returned to them from the federal government. It's just insane, right? However, the element of his tax bill that benefits ordinary working people is actually set to expire. He made the corporate tax cuts permanent, but the tax cuts, which doubled the standard deduction for working Americans, that is going to expire soon, unless Congress extends it. So it's important to know about that. The other thing I want to say is, look, I have fallen for this trap in the past, and I am remorseful about it. I am not judging anyone else who falls for this trap, but I just want to kind of caution you all about it, okay? So we're talking about a rural part of Kentucky that was a Democratic stronghold. They voted for Obama, not once, but twice. They got him reelected. And when you hear the media and overall the Democratic Party try to brush aside these Americans who voted for Trump as nothing more than Americans who are fueled by their hatred and racism, please don't fall for that, okay? Are there racists who support Donald Trump? Absolutely, okay? But I don't think that the majority of Republican voters are voting for Trump specifically because they're racist. A lot of these people voted for Obama, and they're screaming from the rooftops about what it is that they like about Trump. They're talking about what it is that made them turn away from the Democratic Party. And I think it's important to listen to them, especially if the Democratic Party in particular wants to win them back. Now, one Democratic politician did win them back. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But Russell also found out that the issue of immigration was particularly important to Elliott County voters. Here's what they had to say.
Where's the border rank for you in the list of political issues that matter?
1.
It's number 1?
Yes.
How long have you felt the way that you do about the border?
Probably in the last 2 years. The way they're letting them come in, and it's like, there's got to be a stop to it somewhere.
Why do you think so many people are coming up across the border?
Well, it has to be, they've got to be a hell of a spot down there. I mean, I can understand what's going on. They just want something better.
What are those forces that are keeping us on the road, whether you're coming from Kentucky or Honduras? Why are people moving around?
Feed their family.
They're leaving horrible conditions to come here. I get it.
Right.
I understand that.
Right.
But there has to be a right way of doing it. Where is our funding for those people? Why are we not putting it back into our Social Security, into our veterans?
Why aren't we doing that?
You tell me. You're the leftist.
Yeah.
I thought that was an important part of the video because that is what her vision of leftism is. Individuals who, don't care about ordinary Americans, individuals who, would rather help people who enter the country illegally. I don't think that's a good thing, to be honest with you. But what I also got from that video, or that portion of the video, was that they're not hateful toward immigrants. They understand why they would want to come here, especially for economic opportunities, for better conditions. But as you heard from that woman, I mean, she wants a pathway to citizenship. That is not a statement that would come from an individual who hates immigrants. And by the way, if you watch city council meetings in Chicago, when there was a mass influx of asylum seekers in Chicago, and the federal government under Biden's leadership basically failed to give them the resources to handle it, they were furious. And we're talking about a diverse group of people. We're not just talking about white people who are furious about it. And we've shown you some of those city council meetings to kind of show you that, hey, this is a huge political liability for Joe Biden. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting part of what they had to say. Now, Elliott County is now somewhat of an enigma because while voters there support Donald Trump currently, they also support the current Kentucky governor, Andy Beshear, who is not a Republican. He is, in fact, a Democrat. And so Russell tried to find out why that is. Let's watch.
We hear this phrase, why do people vote against their interests? Listen, it makes me mad because that's telling us we're dumb, and we're not.
Andy Beshear is the governor of Kentucky. In 2019 and in 2023, Beshear pulled off something most people thought was impossible. He won as a Democrat in Trump country.
Yeah, I mean, some of this stuff is kind of crazy. Take a look here.
Both times he won Elliott County.
I certainly think, at least for me, winning Elliott County was about waking up every day focused on the same issues that Kentuckians wake up and worry about. It's not the outrage of the day in Washington, D.C. It's things like, do I have a good job, one where I can afford to raise my family? Who is moving my life forward?
Beshear won partly by distancing himself from the National Democratic brand, which has become toxic in Kentucky. But he's not a moderate either. He ran as a pro-union candidate, campaigned on raising teacher pay, and implementing universal pre-K. And like many folks in Elliott County, Beshear traces his political roots back to the New Deal.
FDR showed up, and he produced. And my grandparents met on a WPA project. They were Democrats their entire life, and FDR was a major reason why.
Currently, support among voters for unions is at a record high. It's the highest level since the 1960s. So when we talk about the economic populism really speaking to and resonating with voters across the political aisle, this is what we're talking about. And I do think that Democrats on a national level have a lot of work to do to change their branding. Because right now, their branding screams to working Americans in the middle of the country that they have no interest in representing them, that they only have interest in representing the elite. That's not good for Democrats. Now, luckily, I do think that Kamala Harris gets it to some extent. And I love that, one of her recent political ads focuses on housing affordability. The economic message coming from her, while not very specific, and while she's getting a lot of jabs from the corporate press about it, I think is headed in the right direction. And it kind of robs Donald Trump of what's made his campaigning successful. I mean, he has positioned himself as an economic populist. But I'm very curious to see how that plays out in the debate, which is going to take place on September 10th. We'll be doing special coverage of that debate, so definitely tune in for that. But it is important to understand your fellow Americans, regardless of who they're voting for, because you want to know what the logic behind it is. And yes, some Trump supporters might say crazy things at his rallies, But I think it would be a mistake to paint a picture of all Trump supporters by just looking at those videos or looking at those interviews. Try to understand the people around you. Try to understand what motivates them. I really do think that the country would be headed in a better direction. It would be a lot less divided if we were willing to do that. And I know it's hard, but again, anything worth doing tends to be harder to do.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.